My name is Ava Martinez. I'm 31, an operations analyst turned reluctant fighter, based in Phoenix, Arizona. If you need one word for me, it's too trusting. I believed in systems, checklists, and people who shook your hand and looked you in the eye. I learned the hard way that smiles can hide knives. He laughed when he fired me, actually laughed, tossing my badge into a tray like trash. Weeks later, he froze at a board meeting as the letterhead changed, and my name appeared as his new employer. If you're watching, please like and subscribe. It truly helps more than you know. Have you ever been blindsided at work? Tell me where you're watching from and the moment you realized someone you trusted wasn't on your side. I'm listening. It started with a hallway that smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. You know the kind. Corporate beige. Motivational posters curling at the edges. I had stayed late again, smoothing impossible spreadsheets into clean lines, predicting bottlenecks before anyone felt them. That was my secret talent. Seeing the snags no one else could see. "Martinez, you're still here?" Ethan drawled from his doorway, tie loosened, grin easy. He was my boss, the director of operations, the kind of man who never sent an email without CCing an audience. "I'm finalizing the capacity model," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "If we don't reroute the Mesa load this week, we'll miss the SLA. Customer penalties kick in Friday." He clapped slowly. "Love the initiative, but don't overthink it. People upstairs want headlines, not homework." Homework? The model that would save us 6 figures was homework. I swallowed it. Because I was too trusting. Because I still believed that work spoke for itself. On the day he fired me, the desert heat pressed against the windows like a living thing. He called me into a glass conference room, the kind that makes you feel like you're on display. There was a folder. There's always a folder. "Ava," he began, voice syrupy. "We're restructuring. Nothing personal." He slid a paper across the table. "You're talented, but you're not strategic. We need vision." I stared at the paper, then up at him. "I built the routing playbook you presented to the board last quarter." He smiled. Teeth, dimples, nothing behind the eyes. "We're a team." "Did the team also present my cost savings model without my name on it?" I whispered. He leaned back, lacing his fingers. "You're overreacting," the security guard outside pretended not to look. Ethan extended his hand for my badge. I placed it in his palm, steady. He dropped it into the metal tray with a clink that felt louder than his laugh. "Good luck out there," he said, as if he hadn't just shoved me off a cliff. The Arizona sun made everything look flatter, brighter, crueler. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, and let the silence press against my ribs. I'd been careful, I'd been loyal. I'd stayed late, took blame, gave credit. Too trusting. The words stuck to my throat like sand. My phone pinged. A text from Maya, my closest friend in the office. "I heard. I'm sorry. He's telling people you weren't a culture fit. Culture fit. Translation: too loud when you won't be invisible." I typed back, "Can't talk." Then I just didn't start the engine. I watched the front doors. Ethan stepped out minutes later, laughing with a VP, tossing his arm around the man's shoulders like brothers in victory. They didn't look back. Why would they? Back home, my one bedroom smelled like cumin and lemons. I hadn't cooked. I had no appetite. But scents linger from better days. I sat on the floor with a legal pad and a dying pen. When life flips your desk, you pick up the paper. I wrote 3 columns: facts, wounds, assets. Facts. I'd built the capacity model. I'd drafted the Mesa contingency. I'd documented every decision in email threads and change logs. Wounds. They took my work. They erased my name. He laughed. Assets. My brain, my notebooks. One unexpected friend in finance owed me a favor. And a contact. Quiet, powerful, who once said, "Call me if you ever need to make a move." I stared at that last line. Make a move. 2 months earlier, during a supplier audit, I'd sat across from a woman in a midnight suit with a stainless steel watch and eyes that missed nothing. Lena Park, principal at a regional investment group. She'd asked precise questions about throughput and shrinkage. I'd answered. She'd smiled, and on the way out, she'd passed me a card. "You're the only person in this building who talks in numbers that turn into dollars," she said. "If you ever want a different seat at the table, call." I hadn't called. I was loyal. I was too trusting. Now her card burned in my desk like a match. When I finally dialed, my hands shook. She picked up on the second ring. Ava. I wondered when the company would make the mistake. I told her everything. No dramatics. Just facts shaped like knives. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a small silence, then the soft slide of a decision locking into place. "I've been watching your firm," Lena said. "Bloated, top-heavy, coasting on contracts it no longer deserves. I'm assembling a coalition. We're looking at an acquisition." My breath caught. "An acquisition?" "Hostile if necessary, friendly if possible," she replied. "But friendship requires grown-ups. Your director isn't one. Join me. Bring your playbooks. I'll bring the lawyers." I stared at my reflection in the black TV screen. The woman looking back wasn't the one who handed over a badge with shaking fingers. She was something else. Bone-tired, yes, but sharpening. "What would my role be?" I asked. Lena's chuckle was warm and terrifying. "That depends on how much blood you're willing to leave on the floor." I didn't sleep that night. I lined up my notebooks. I cross-referenced emails. I built a dossier of inefficiencies with the tenderness of a surgeon and the rage of a storm. Every homework spreadsheet saved a quarter point. Every red flag was ignored for optics. Every metric Ethan paraded as his personal genius. At dawn, the desert light poured through the blinds like a verdict. I texted Lena. "I'm in." Her reply was immediate. "The board meets in 4 weeks. I'll put your name where it belongs." 4 weeks. Later, I sat at the far end of a long mahogany table beneath a chandelier that hummed. Ethan swaggered in late, laughing, oblivious. The chair at the head of the table remained empty as the assistant distributed new packets. He flipped his packet open, smirk fading, mouth parting with an audible breath. Because the letterhead had changed, and the name just beneath it belonged to the woman he'd laughed at when he took her badge. You don't just wake up one morning with a fire in your chest and a spreadsheet in your veins. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, the daughter of a woman who stitched the world together one hospital shift at a time. My mom, Rosa, was a nurse who never had the luxury of excuses. She'd come home with her hair matted, her shoes squeaking from disinfectant, her body bent from 12 hours on her feet. But she still found the strength to heat tortillas and sit with me at the table. "Finish what you start, Ava," she'd say, spooning beans onto plates. "And don't expect applause. The world doesn't clap for women like us." I didn't realize how prophetic that was until years later. We didn't have much, but we had rules. Work before rest. Homework was done at the kitchen table before the TV. Finish your plate. Nothing went to waste. Family dinners matter. Even if it was boxed mac and cheese, we ate together. These rules shaped me more than I understood at the time. They taught me persistence, efficiency, and how to take pride in small things. But there was one rule my mom never said out loud, though I lived by it anyway. Trust those who smile at you. That was my flaw. I had one older brother, Mateo, who was my mother's mirror image in stubbornness but not in discipline. Mateo was charming, impulsive, and always with a scheme in his pocket. "You work too hard, Ava," he'd tease, flicking my notebooks closed when I was trying to study. "Life's short. No one gives you extra points for being serious." But he loved me in his way, Loud, protective, prone to bar fights if someone said the wrong thing. He thought I was too soft. I thought he was too reckless. And somewhere between us, Mom tried to balance the scales. Sundays were sacred in our home. We'd pile into my grandmother's adobe house, the smell of chili and cilantro soaking the walls. Cousins raced through the backyard, uncles argued about soccer, and my grandmother's laugh carried over it all. I'd sit with the women at the table, listening to their stories, how they stretched money, how they survived men who left, how they never stopped showing up to work. That's where I learned resilience isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, like the hum of an old refrigerator keeping everything inside from spoiling. By the time I was in high school, I was juggling 2 part-time jobs, tutoring math and working evenings at a grocery store. Mateo mocked me, of course. "You're 16 and acting 40, he laughed. But when college acceptance letters came, and mine included a full ride for business analytics, the laughter stopped, at least for a moment. I left Texas for Arizona with 2 suitcases, a scholarship, and my mother's voice in my head. Finish what you start. I took my first corporate job at 23. The office cubicles smelled of ink and ambition. I was wide-eyed, eager, and certain that effort equaled recognition. And at first, it seemed true. Managers praised me for catching errors, for spotting risks before they became disasters. Colleagues leaned on me for clarity. But then something happened that I brushed off as a coincidence. A manager presented my analysis as his own during a quarterly meeting. Everyone applauded. He didn't correct them. Afterward, he winked at me. Teamwork, right? I laughed it off, too trusting to see the pattern. It happened again, and again. A process I streamlined suddenly appeared in another slide deck. A solution I proposed became someone else's innovation. Each time, I told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was the company doing well. What mattered was being useful. But use can turn into abuse when you're not looking. One night, during a family dinner back home, Mateo caught me staring at my laptop between bites of enchiladas. "Let me guess," he smirked. "Someone else is taking credit again." I looked up, startled. "How do you know?" "Because, Ava," he said, "you wear that face every time someone robs you blind, and you let them. One day you'll stop being the knife they use and become the hand that holds it." I laughed nervously, brushing it off. "I'm fine, Mateo," but his eyes didn't waver. "No, you're not, and you don't even see it yet." I thought he was being dramatic. I thought hard work would shield me. But as I packed my bags to return to Arizona, his words followed me like an echo. And when Ethan laughed as he fired me years later, I finally understood what Mateo meant. At first, I thought Ethan was just careless with words. Some bosses are like that, quick to pat themselves on the back, slow to pass credit. But soon it became obvious. His carelessness wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. One Tuesday morning, we were crammed into the 14th floor conference room, the kind with walls that barely blocked noise from the hallway. The VP of Logistics was in town, suit pressed so sharp it could cut glass. I had worked all weekend building a predictive routing model. I was nervous but proud. This was the kind of work that could save us hundreds of thousands. Ethan stood at the front, slides queued up. My slides. He clicked through, talking like he'd written every formula, like he'd sweated through every revision. By adjusting capacity flows through Mesa and Tucson, we project a 17% reduction in penalties, he said, gesturing toward the chart I'd built at 2 a.m. The VP nodded, impressed. "Excellent work, Ethan. This is exactly what we need." I waited. I waited for Ethan to say my name. To gesture at me. To acknowledge the analyst who had done the heavy lifting. He didn't. Instead, he said, "That's why my team runs lean. We get results." I caught him in the hallway afterward, my voice low. "You could have mentioned I built that model." He smiled, sipping his overpriced coffee. Relax, Ava. It's all team effort. Team effort doesn't mean erasing names, I whispered. His eyes hardened. You're young. Let me give you advice. Don't get hung up on credit. It makes you look insecure. The words lodged in my chest. Insecure. Not brilliant, not resourceful. Insecure. It wasn't just meetings. At lunch, Ethan loved an audience. One afternoon, while we ate in the break room, he leaned back in his chair, smirking. You know, Ava's a machine, he said to the group. Give her a spreadsheet and she'll crank it out. But strategy? Big picture thinking? That's not really her lane. The table chuckled politely. I swallowed my salad, my throat burning. Funny, because the big picture you presented this morning came from my lane. His smile didn't falter. See? Insecure. The word landed again, sharper this time, as co-workers avoided my eyes. Within weeks, I could feel it spreading. People started coming to Ethan directly for updates on projects I was leading. Meetings I wasn't invited to suddenly referenced Ethan's new plan. Maya, my closest friend in the office, warned me. He's rewriting history, she whispered, over coffee. Every win, he attaches to his name. Every miss, he drops in your lap. I clenched my mug. But the data is there. The emails, the timestamps. She shook her head. People don't remember details. They remember who said it loudest in the room. One evening, as I packed up my things, Ethan passed by, loosening his tie. You're talented, Ava, he said casually. But talent doesn't matter if people don't like you. I froze. What does that mean? He leaned against the doorframe, lowering his voice. You want to climb here? Learn to play politics. Stop pushing so hard. Smile more. Be easier. I stared at him, my pulse racing. So you want me to do the work but not be seen doing the work? His smirk widened. Exactly. The breaking point came during a quarterly town hall. Senior leadership was present, even a few board members. Ethan fielded a question about cost savings. He chuckled, gesturing toward me at the back of the room. Ava here, she's our calculator. Never met a spreadsheet she didn't love. But don't ask her to lead a project. She'll drown in the details. Laughter rippled across the room. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me, assessing, judging. Maya shot me an apologetic glance. I forced myself to smile, even as my throat closed. But inside, something cracked. Because I realized it wasn't just about credit anymore. He wasn't just silencing me. He was building a narrative. And when the time came, that narrative would destroy me. The signs were there, but I ignored them. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It whispers, it hints, it builds, until suddenly it's standing over you with a folder in hand. It was a Wednesday morning when the invite popped into my inbox. Check in with Ethan, 2 p.m. Nothing unusual about that. Except for the location, Conference Room C, the one with glass walls and a view of the parking lot. That was where people disappeared from. My stomach tightened. I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, my hands shook when I grabbed my notebook, the one where I always kept receipts, emails, formulas, timestamps, just in case. The office buzzed as usual. Phones ringing, printers whirring, chatter about weekend plans. But as I walked down that hallway, it all seemed muted, distant. Through the glass wall, I saw Ethan already seated. A manila folder lay in front of him. He was smiling. That was worse than a frown. I opened the door. The air conditioning was too cold, or maybe my blood had drained away. Have a seat, Ava, he said, voice dripping casual charm. He didn't waste time. He flipped open the folder, sliding a document across the table. We've been evaluating. Staffing needs? He began. The company's moving in a new direction, more visionary, less granular. Granular. I'd heard that word used to dismiss me before, My throat went dry. "What are you saying?" He leaned back, folding his hands. "You're talented, but not a culture fit. Too detail-focused. Not enough leadership presence. Effective immediately, your position is eliminated." The words hit like a slap. Eliminated. I stared at him, shaking my head. "I've been running the Mesa capacity model. I saved us from six-figure penalties this quarter. Those weren't guesses, Ethan. They were my projections," he shrugged. "Projections don't inspire. Executives want vision, not math homework." My hands clenched on the edge of the table. "Vision doesn't keep trucks moving. My homework did." His smirk widened, cruel now. "And yet, here we are." He slid a small tray toward me. "Your badge, please." The world narrowed to that. Tray. A shallow metal dish meant for pens and paper clips, now waiting for my name, my access, my identity. My hand trembled as I unclipped the badge from my lanyard. For a second, I thought I might crush it in my fist. Instead, I placed it gently in the tray. The plastic clinked, louder than it should have been. Final. I stood, chest tight, throat burning. Ethan rose too, walking me to the door like a host ushering out a guest. "Good luck out there," he said, then chuckled. Actually chuckled. The sound sliced through me. Not nervous laughter. Not kind. It was the laugh of someone who thought he'd won. I froze, my back stiff. My voice came out low, trembling. "You'll regret this." He raised an eyebrow, still smirking. "Doubt it." The hallway stretched endlessly as I walked out, clutching my notebook like a lifeline. Colleagues glanced up, eyes darting away, just as quickly. Some knew. Some didn't. Maya caught my arm near the elevators, her eyes wide. "Ava! Oh my God, he didn't—" I nodded, unable to speak. Her face crumpled. "I'm so sorry." I forced a shaky smile. "It's fine." It wasn't fine. Outside, the Arizona heat pressed against me like a weight. I sat in my car, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wet, my jaw clenched. I whispered to myself, barely audible. I gave him everything. And he laughed. The tears came hot and fast. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, sobbing until the leather was slick with salt. But as the sobs subsided, something else took their place. A spark. Small. Dangerous. Because if he thought this was the end of my story, he had no idea. What was coming next? I didn't drive home right away. I sat in the office parking lot for almost an hour, my hands gripping the wheel so hard the veins stood out like ropes. The Arizona sun blistered through the windshield, but I didn't feel it. My skin was clammy, cold. The sound of Ethan's laughter replayed over and over in my skull. Not words. Just that sound. Sharp, mocking, final. When I finally walked into my apartment, the air smelled stale. The blinds were still half drawn from that morning. My shoes scuffed against the floor, too loud in the silence. I dropped my bag, slid down the door, and pulled my knees to my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't know who I was without that badge clipped to my shirt. I whispered into the emptiness, voice cracking. "What do I do now?" No answer. Just the hum of the refrigerator. For days, I drifted. I ignored calls. From Maya. I ignored texts from my mom. My brother Mateo left me 3 voicemails, each one angrier than the last. "You can't hide forever, Ava," he barked in one. "Get up." But I couldn't. I stayed in bed, blinds closed, laptop unopened. My notebook sat in a pile on the nightstand, untouched. I was terrified to open them. Because if I did, I'd have to face the truth. All that work, all those late nights, all that loyalty, had meant nothing. At night, I lay staring at the ceiling, thoughts gnawing at me. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe I wasn't leadership material. Maybe I was just a calculator, drowning in details. The words repeated like a curse, Not strategic. Not visionary. Insecure. I pressed my palms to my ears, but they didn't stop. One night, I ended up on the cold tiles of my bathroom, sobbing so hard my ribs ached. I gave them everything, I gasped, rocking back and forth. Why wasn't it enough? Why am I never enough? The words echoed against the porcelain sink, pitiful, desperate. For a moment, I thought about giving up completely, finding something small, safe, invisible, where no one could laugh at me. Again. The idea of disappearing felt almost like relief. But then, a memory rose, clear, vivid, unshakable. It was my mother's voice, years ago as I hunched over my textbooks at the kitchen table. Finish what you start, Ava, even when they... Laugh, even when it hurts, you finish. The words hit me like a slap. Finish. Not surrender. I dragged myself up from the floor, gripping the counter for balance. My reflection in the mirror was a wreck, eyes swollen, cheeks streaked with tears. But beneath the mess, something flickered. Not strength, not yet, but defiance. I whispered, voice hoarse but steady this time. He laughed. He thinks he's won, but I won't stay broken. With trembling hands, I opened the notebook on my nightstand. The first page was filled with numbers, diagrams, and notes scrawled in the margins. Proof, receipts, evidence of every contribution Ethan had erased. My tears blurred the ink, but I kept turning pages. Each one was a reminder. I wasn't worthless. I wasn't invisible. I was the one holding the blueprint he'd stolen. I sat at my desk until dawn, pages spread around me like battle plans. When the sun broke through the blinds, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Resolve. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew one thing. Ethan hadn't ended me. He'd lit the fuse. And one day soon, that fuse would burn all the way to him, and when it did, the explosion would leave him begging for the mercy he never gave me. Revenge isn't loud at the beginning. It's quiet. It's coffee at 3 a.m., documents spread across the table, highlighters bleeding color onto pages like veins. That's how it started for me. I pulled out every notebook, every spreadsheet, every email I'd ever saved. Years of late nights and missed weekends were cataloged in black ink and digital timestamps. Every idea Ethan had claimed as his own. I had drafts, prototypes, versions with my name on them. Every efficiency he bragged about, I had the cost models, showing the math behind the curtain. Every vision he'd presented to the board. I had the receipts that proved the vision was mine. I wasn't just building a defense. I was building a weapon. I dialed Lena Park. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm, sharp as always. Ava, I was expecting your call sooner. I'm ready, I said. There was no tremor in my voice this time. Good, she replied. Bring everything. Numbers don't lie, but people do. If you want to take him down, we'll need more than hurt feelings. We'll need proof and leverage. I have both, I whispered. She chuckled. Then let's make him regret underestimating you. The next step was Maya. We met in a quiet diner off the freeway, far from downtown eyes. She slid into the booth, looking nervous. You disappeared, she said softly. I was worried. I had to, I admitted. But now I need your help. She frowned. Ava, what are you planning? I slid a folder across the table. She opened it, scanning the documents. I watched her eyes widen, her jaw tighten. Ethan used all of this as his own? I nodded. Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the folder. Tell me what you need. We worked in secret. Maya funneled me internal reports, showing how Ethan had continued writing on my playbooks even after I was gone. Lena's team began mapping weaknesses in the company's financial structure. It was delicate work, Too much noise, and Ethan would catch wind. But the beauty of arrogance is that it blinds men like him. He thought he'd silenced me. He never imagined I'd be planning my return. The nights stretched into mornings. My apartment floor disappeared under stacks of paper and color-coded tabs. I stopped crying. I stopped doubting. Instead, I started whispering to myself as I worked, voice calm, steady. He laughed when he fired me. He thought it was over. He has no idea. One evening, Mateo stopped by unannounced. He took one look at the chaos in my apartment, papers, charts, sticky notes on the walls, and raised his eyebrows. "Damn, sis. You building NASA in here?" I smirked. "No, I'm building something better." He picked up one of the folders, whistling low. "This is war." "Yes," I said simply. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. About time." The real turning point came when Lena called me after reviewing the documents. "Ava," she said, her tone laced with satisfaction. "This is gold. With this, we don't just acquire the company, we restructure it, and when that happens, we'll need someone who understands the operations better than anyone else." I held my breath. "You mean me?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You won't just be a survivor, Ava. You'll be sitting at the table he thinks you don't belong at. Maybe even at the head." My pulse thundered in my ears. For the first time, I could see it. The end game. The pieces were falling into place. Ethan was laughing in his glass office, smug and certain. But he didn't know that every smirk, every stolen word, every mocking insecure was now part of the rope tightening around his neck. And soon, I'd be the one pulling it. The first. Crack came quietly, no fireworks, no headlines. Just a nervous email forwarded to me from Maya late one night. The email was from a senior manager to Ethan. "Ethan, the variance in the Mesa model doesn't line up with your last report. Can you clarify?" Attached was the spreadsheet. My spreadsheet. Except he had stripped my formatting, changed a few colors, and called it his own. But the formulas, those were mine. And now they weren't adding up, because without me to maintain them, the structure was collapsing. Maya added a note of her own. "He's sweating. You should have seen his face in the meeting." I read the lines 3 times, savoring them, like the first sip of strong coffee. A week later, Lena invited me to an investor dinner at a sleek downtown restaurant. Suits and pearls everywhere, wine poured like water. She introduced me not as an unemployed analyst, but as our operations strategist. I caught my reflection in the polished glass walls, hairpinned, blazer sharp, shoulders back. For the first time since Ethan dropped my badge in that tray, I didn't look broken. Investors leaned in as I explained efficiency flows, cost avoidance strategies, and capacity realignments. Their eyes lit up. "This is the kind of leadership the company's been missing," one of them said. Lena just smiled knowingly. Through Maya, I started hearing whispers from inside the company. "Ethan seems distracted. His reports don't add up like they used to. Did you hear? He bungled the Tucson reroute, cost us penalties." Every whisper was fuel. I didn't need to expose him yet. His arrogance was doing half the work for me. It happened on a humid Thursday evening. I was leaving a meeting with Lena when I saw him. Ethan, leaning against his car in the parking garage, is scrolling through his phone. He didn't see me at first. When he did, his smirk returned instantly. Well, he said. "If it isn't my favorite calculator, heard you've been keeping busy." I forced a calm smile. "You could say that." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Careful, Ava. People might think you're trying to make trouble. And trouble doesn't end well." I tilted my head. "Funny. Trouble is exactly what I'm building." His smirk faltered, just for a second. Then he laughed, but it sounded thinner than before. "Good luck with that." That night, I replayed the moment. The look in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, It wasn't full revenge. Not yet, but it was something. For the first time, he knew I wasn't gone. I was circling, waiting, sharpening. The next morning, Maya called. Her voice was hushed, urgent. "You won't believe this. The VP actually questioned him in front of the team. Asked why the Mesa model was falling apart. I gripped the phone, my heart racing. And Ethan blamed, "You?" I froze. He said the old analyst left it messy. That you were detail-obsessed but short-sighted. My stomach twisted. But then Maya added, "No one bought it. They've seen how sloppy he's been since you left. People are finally noticing." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. It was happening. The narrative was shifting. But whispers weren't enough. Doubt wasn't enough. The next move had to be public, undeniable, final. And I was ready to strike. The boardroom smelled faintly of leather and power. Long mahogany table, glass pitchers of water that no one touched. The chandelier hummed above like a living thing. I sat at the far end, papers stacked neatly, Lena on one side of me, investors on the other. My pulse pounded so loudly I wondered if anyone else could hear it. The air shifted when Ethan swaggered in. His tie was loose, his grin wide, his eyes sweeping the room like a king surveying his court. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, striding to his seat. "Glad we could all come together. I've got some updates you'll want to hear." His voice oozed confidence. He had no idea the floor beneath him was already cracking. I kept my face still, my hands folded. The chair at the head of the table was still empty. A hush fell as the board's lead investor entered, flanked by Lena. The investor cleared his throat. "Today, we formalize the new leadership structure. You'll find updated documents in the packets before you." Papers slid across the table. Pages flipped. Ethan grabbed his copy, flipping through quickly. His smirk froze. His hand stilled, because at the top of the letterhead, bold and undeniable, was my name. Chief Operations Officer, Ava Martinez. "What is this?" Ethan sputtered, his face reddening. The investor's voice was calm, deliberate. "A restructuring. Effective immediately." All eyes turned toward me. For once, I didn't shrink. I met Ethan's gaze, steady, calm. "Hello, Ethan." He laughed nervously, looking around the room. This has to be a joke. She's not leadership material. She's insecure. She drowns in details." His voice cracked, too loud, too desperate. Lena leaned forward, sliding a folder across the table. "These are Ava's models, forecasts, and cost savings. Work you've been passing off as your own. Every number checks out. Investors have reviewed them. Without her, your so-called vision collapses." Gasps, murmurs. Ethan's jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous." She's a calculator, nothing more." I spoke, my tone calm but cutting. "A calculator doesn't rebuild your Mesa flows. A calculator doesn't save 6 figures in penalties. A calculator doesn't expose your lies." The board members leaned back, watching. Some exchanged knowing looks. Ethan's face was slick with sweat. He tugged at his collar, stammering. You can't just—" The investor cut him off. "We already did." I stood slowly, placing my palms flat on the table. My voice was low, steady. "You laughed when you fired me. You dropped my badge like it meant nothing. But here's the truth, Ethan." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "You never fired me. You freed me, and now I sign your checks." The room was dead quiet, except for the sound of Ethan's breathing. Ragged, uneven. One board member whispered, "Incredible." Another muttered, "Karma." Ethan pushed back his chair, standing too fast. Papers scattered. "This isn't over," he hissed, but it was. Everyone in the room knew it. Because while the execution had landed, the fallout was just beginning. And as Ethan stormed out of the boardroom, I knew the silence he left behind would echo louder than his laughter ever had. After the boardroom explosion, silence followed Ethan like a shadow. The man who once strutted through hallways with a smirk now walked with his head down, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. The same employees who had laughed at his jokes now turned away, whispering in corners. It was surreal, watching the empire of arrogance crumble in real time. When I returned to the office for the first time in my new role, the atmosphere was electric. People stood taller, spoke softer, as if the air itself had changed. Maya grinned as she met me in the lobby. "They don't know whether to hug you or bow." I laughed softly. "Neither. I just want them to do their jobs." But the truth was, their stares told me everything. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was undeniable. Reports trickled in from every corner. Ethan missed meetings. Ethan snapped at interns. Ethan submitted sloppy reports that were torn apart in minutes, and then the inevitable. HR confirmed his resignation, effective immediately. He didn't even last 2 weeks. Maya told me she found him in the garage one evening, sitting in his car, staring at the steering wheel. He looked small, she said quietly, like the laugh got stuck in his throat and never came out again. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but all I felt was tired. When I told my mom, her voice cracked with pride. "Ava, mija, I always knew you were more than they said. I hope you never doubt it again." Mateo, of course, reacted differently. "So let me get this straight. You're his boss now?" "Damn, sis. That's brutal." "I love it." He laughed until tears streamed down his face. "Bet he wishes he never messed with you." I smiled, but something inside me stayed quiet. Around the office, the story spread like wildfire. "Did you hear? Ethan fired her, and now she runs operations. Poetic justice. She was always the brains. Everyone knows it now." The whispers were sharp, sweet, vindicating, but at night, lying in my apartment, the whispers didn't silence the echoes of his laughter. It still replayed sometimes, like a scar that burned even after healing. Victory didn't erase the pain. It didn't erase the months I doubted myself, the nights I cried on the bathroom floor, the fear that I'd never climb back. What it did was prove something more important. I was never what he said I was. Not insecure. Not small. Not replaceable. I was a woman who had built her own empire from the ashes of betrayal. One evening, over drinks, Maya leaned across the table. "Do you feel better now? That you've won?" I swirled my glass thinking. "Better," I said slowly, "but not lighter. Revenge gives you justice. Empowerment gives you peace. I'm still chasing the second one," she nodded, squeezing my hand. Because while Ethan was gone, while the company was mine to shape, one question still lingered in the air like smoke. Would I let his laugh haunt me forever? Or would I finally close the door on him and on the version of myself that believed his words? The answer was coming, and when it did, it wouldn't just be an ending. It would be a beginning. The night after Ethan's resignation was announced, I stayed late in the office. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels almost holy. I walked the same hallway where he once smirked, once mocked, once handed me a tray and demanded my badge. The fluorescent lights hummed above, but they no longer felt harsh. I stopped outside the glass conference room where he fired me. The memory rushed back, the sting of humiliation, the sound of his laugh. For a moment, my throat tightened, then I smiled, because now it wasn't pain I felt. It was power. That weekend, I invited my family to dinner, not in some fancy restaurant, but in my own apartment, the place where I had once cried, once doubted, once rebuilt myself page by page. Mom brought tortillas. Mateo brought too much beer. We sat around the table, laughter filling the air. At one point, Mom reached across, taking my hand. "You've finished what you started, Ava, and you didn't just survive, you rose." Her words settled deep in my chest, finally silencing Ethan's voice. On Monday, I stood at the head of the operations team, a room full of expectant faces staring back at me. "I know you've heard stories," I began. "Some true, some twisted. But here's what matters. This isn't about me, and it isn't about the man who left. It's about us." I let my eyes sweep the room. "No one here will ever be erased again. If you build something, your name stays on it. That's the culture now." The applause was soft at first, then grew louder. It wasn't the hollow clapping Ethan had chased. It was real, solid, earned. In the quiet of my office later, I thought about Maya's question. "Do you feel better now?" The answer had changed. Yes, I felt better. And lighter, because revenge had been the spark, but empowerment, that was the fire. Ethan's laugh had once broken me. But now it was just background noise in the story of my rise. I whispered to myself, steady, strong. You never fired me. You freed me. And this time, the words didn't tremble. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Tell me, if someone laughed at your downfall, would you fight to rise above and prove them wrong? Or would you walk away forever and find peace? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it, because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't making them regret it. It's living so fully that you never think of them again.